What if the desire that drives your life wasn't a path to happiness, but a silent trap keeping you prisoner to suffering? Nietzsche believed that desire isn't a promise of fulfillment, but a symptom of our hunger for power, our craving to overcome and dominate. What we call love, passion, or ambition might be deep down just the disguised face of this force that runs through us. And what if everything you dream of conquering was nothing more than an illusion created to keep you moving without ever reaching rest? Nietzsche didn't want us to accept easy answers. He invited us to face the cruelty of desire, not as something to be denied, but as a truth to be unveiled. To desire is to be condemned to lack, but it's also to hold in your hands the fire of creation. How far would you be willing to go to transform this flame into power instead of prison? Nietzsche saw desire as something inevitable, almost like an underground current flowing within every human being. It's impossible to live without desiring, just as it's impossible to breathe without drawing air. However, for him, desire wasn't just a need to be filled, but direct expression of what he called the will to power, life's natural tendency to expand, overcome itself, impose itself. Unlike other philosophers who saw desire as lack, Nietzsche perceived in it a force, but precisely because it's force, it can also become illusion. Think about how many times you believed that by fulfilling a desire, you would finally be complete. The new car, the long-awaited relationship, the trip dreamed of for years. The instant the desire is satisfied, pleasure exists, but it's fleeting, almost slips through your fingers. Soon another desire appears, perhaps bigger, perhaps more demanding, and the feeling of fullness dissolves. This isn't chance, but nature. Desire wasn't made to be fully satisfied, but to maintain life's movement. It's like an engine that can never be turned off. Nietzsche warned us against the naivety of believing that desire is a path to stable happiness. Happiness for him wasn't rest after conquest, but the capacity to affirm movement, to embrace the incessant flow of desires without clinging to a final point. It's cruel to realize that perhaps there will never be the moment when everything will be complete, but at the same time, it's liberating. If there's no arrival point, each instant of intensity is already in itself a piece of eternity. The illusion of desire appears when we confuse this vital flow with the promise of definitive possession. Desiring becomes dangerous when we believe that only one object, one person, or one objective can save us. It's at this point that obsessions arise. Emotional dependencies, almost religious attachment to an idea of redemption. How many lie waiting for the day when they'll find the right person and finally be happy? How many work tirelessly believing that when they reach a certain level of wealth, they'll finally be able to live? Nietzsche would say this waiting is a mistake, because desire never grants rest, it only transforms. However, we must be careful not to confuse this criticism with pessimism. Nietzsche didn't want us to abandon desires or live as ascetics, denying life. On the contrary, he believed that desire is life's most authentic expression in us. The issue isn't to destroy it, but to understand it. When we accept that desire is force and not promise, we can deal with it more lucidly. Instead of seeking final possession, we begin to value the intensity of the search, the process itself, the flame that burns and propels us. Imagine an artist before a blank canvas. His desire to create is never completely satisfied because the finished work never coincides with the ideal he had in mind. But it's exactly this distance, this dissatisfaction, that makes him paint again, that keeps him alive in the creative process. The work isn't the end of desire, but proof that desire is movement. This also happens to us. We live between conquests that soon become insufficient, but it's in this interval that we transform ourselves. Nietzsche believed this illusion of desire is sustained because we're afraid to face naked, raw reality. Life is excess, overflow, struggle without rest. We seek the comfort of believing there will be a final balm that will calm us. But accepting that this doesn't exist is freeing ourselves from eternal waiting. Desire as illusion imprisons us, but as force elevates us. The choice lies in how we interpret it. When we look at daily life, we perceive how this force infiltrates everything. It's not just the desire for great conquests, but also the small and constant impulse, eating something sweet, buying an object we don't need, checking our phone looking for a notification, small discharges of will that never end. Nietzsche would say that instead of feeling guilty about this, we should recognize there the sign of life pulsing. The error lies in believing that one of these gestures could forever resolve our restlessness. Deep down, desire is both our burden and our gift. It's what tears us from inertia, makes us create, love, fight, but it's also what deceives us, promising rest that will never come. Nietzsche wanted us to see this duplicity without masks, without illusions, so we could live more fully. For whoever understands desire as force no longer needs to delude themselves with the promise of completeness. They learn to dance with lack, to transform absence into movement. Nietzsche didn't believe in romantic love as an ideal of fusion between two pure souls. For him, what we call love is often just disguised desire, a field of forces where each one tries, consciously or not, to dominate the other. Love, in this sense, isn't harmony, but dispute. How many times do we say, "I love you," when we really mean, "I possess you" or "I control you"? Romantic love inherited from religious and poetic traditions would be, for Nietzsche, one of the greatest collective illusions, because it hides the true impulse that inhabits relationships, the will to power. When someone desires another person, they don't desire just their presence. They also desire the power to be reciprocated, to be chosen, to occupy a central place in the other's life. Amorous desire is always crossed by comparisons, jealousy, fears. To love is, in a way, to want to be irreplaceable. And this already reveals how much the promise of purity in love is illusory. Whoever loves deep down seeks not only to give, but also to possess. Nietzsche saw this contradiction with uncomfortable clarity. While culture insists on presenting love as disinterested surrender, reality shows we rarely stop projecting our own needs onto the other. That's why so many relationships become manipulation games. One seeks attention, the other offers affection in exchange for security, and both move in circles of power. Even the most romantic gestures can hide this dynamic. The gift given, the promise made, the care offered all can carry with them the desire to be recognized, to be valued, to gain influence over the other's heart. In daily life, this vision may seem too cruel. We like to believe that loving is something pure, an ideal that elevates us above instincts. But Nietzsche invites us to distrust this purity. He suggests that loving is also fighting. And in this fight, there are no absolute winners. There are only flows of force that confront and momentarily balance each other. Love, in its intensity, is a dance of domination and submission, albeit subtle, often unconscious. Consider the common experience of jealousy. When we feel jealous, it's not just fear of losing the other, but also an assertion of possession. We want the loved person to belong to us exclusively, for there to be no space for rivals. Jealousy isn't a sign of pure love, but of love as appropriation. Nietzsche would say we shouldn't demonize this feeling, but understand it as expression of the will to power. It reveals that behind the discourse of surrender, there's always the demand for possession. Another example is in the idealization of the other half. This idea that someone will come complete our lacks is a way of transforming love into dependence. Whoever believes they need the other to become whole ends up placing themselves in a position of vulnerability and inevitably creates power relations. On one side, the one who depends; on the other, the one seen as source of completeness. Love thus becomes an unequal force relation, a search not for shared life, but for individual salvation. Nietzsche didn't deny love's beauty, but wanted to remove from it the illusions that weaken it. For him, truly loving would be facing the relationship not as fusion, but as creative combat. Two strong beings don't cancel each other out, don't complete each other by lack, but stimulate, challenge, mutually elevate each other. To love, in this sense, isn't to forget oneself, but to affirm oneself before the other and accept that the other also affirms themselves. It's transforming the tension of possession into fuel for growth. This perspective forces us to rethink our bonds. How many times do we remain in relationships because we believe love should be sacrifice? How many times do we accept being dominated or dominate without realizing? Nietzsche calls us to break with illusory romanticism and face squarely the game of forces that really composes our love stories. Not to abandon them, but to live them with more lucidity. Love, seen thus, doesn't stop being intense, but gains another color. It stops being a promise of eternal peace and becomes a field of creation. Instead of waiting for the other to complete us, we recognize in them a fighting partner, someone with whom we share life's risk. There are no guarantees, no final stability. There's only the constant confrontation of desires that can both destroy and elevate. The cruel truth Nietzsche reveals to us is that loving is always desiring, and desiring is always seeking power. The challenge lies in transforming this impulse, which could imprison, into possibility of expansion. When we accept that love is also dispute, we can learn to play this game more consciously, less naively. Not to deny passion, but to live it without masks, without illusions, as vital force that runs through us. From early on, we learn to distrust desire. Whether through religion, education, or family traditions, it's almost always presented to us as something dangerous, uncontrolled, capable of taking us away from the right path. It's no coincidence that in many cultures, desiring excessively is synonymous with sin or vice. For Nietzsche, this distrust toward desire didn't arise by chance, but from a historical strategy. Morality built masks to domesticate the vital force that desire carries. Morality, especially that of Christian inspiration, transformed desire into something to be repressed. The body came to be seen as enemy of the soul, and impulses were classified as sinful. Eating too much, drinking too much, feeling sexual pleasure, coveting power or wealth, all this should be contained. Thus, desire stopped being seen as life's energy and became a field of guilt. Whoever desired too much was a sinner, weak, in need of forgiveness. This is the logic of herd morality, not to completely destroy desire, but to gag it, make it a reason for shame and obedience. Nietzsche saw in this repression a control mechanism. When desire is condemned, the individual learns to distrust themselves. They begin to carry within themselves an invisible judge who watches them at every gesture, every thought. It's at this moment that resentment is born. Instead of affirming life, the subject bends, blames themselves, punishes themselves. They don't abandon their impulses, they just disguise them, and thus live divided between what they feel and what they believe is correct. The problem isn't just in the great questions of religious morality, but also in small daily gestures. How many times do we stop expressing a simple desire for fear of judgment? How many times do we pretend not to want something just to seem more virtuous? This moral mask infiltrates details. The young person who's ashamed of their sexuality, the person who disguises their ambition not to seem greedy, the worker who hides their anger for fear of seeming ungrateful. All these are examples of how we learn to deny desire in the name of artificial virtue. Nietzsche denounced this process as a form of weakening. The moralized man is no longer free. He's domesticated. The force that could be creative transforms into submission. Desire, which should propel us, becomes an internal enemy. But the truth is, desire doesn't disappear. It remains there, pulsing, only now covered with masks. And the more masked, the more distorted it becomes. From repression comes hypocrisy. Whoever preaches chastity lives on secret fantasies. Whoever condemns power seeks to dominate it in silence. Whoever exalts humility dreams of greatness. This dynamic can be observed in many institutions. Churches that condemn pleasure but accumulate wealth. Leaders who preach simplicity but desire prestige. Families that teach modesty but feed competition. Desire never disappears, it just changes clothes. And it's precisely this contrast between discourse and practice that Nietzsche called disguised nihilism, when we deny life in the name of ideals we can't fulfill. But Nietzsche didn't want us to simply reject all morality. He provoked us to create new values closer to life's reality. Instead of pretending desire is an enemy, we could recognize it as an ally. Morality that represses generates guilty individuals. Morality that understands can generate strong individuals. It's not about blindly surrendering to every impulse, but assuming desire as an essential part of who we are. Imagine someone who dreams of professional recognition but learned that ambition is ugly. This person might live in silence, conforming to little, while envying those who dare to seek more. In this process, their desire doesn't disappear, but turns against itself, generating resentment and frustration. Nietzsche would say the most honest path would be to affirm this ambition, transform it into creative force, into motor to overcome their own limits. What imprisons isn't desire, but the lie we tell ourselves to hide it. Morality's mask prevents us from living fully because it forces us to lie about what we really want. It promises virtue, but delivers submission. Nietzsche challenges us to remove this mask, even if it hurts, even if it makes us seem less good in the world's eyes. For only those who face their desires without guilt can truly transform them into creative power. Desire doesn't need to be sin or virtue. It's simply life in movement. It's up to us to decide whether we'll hide it behind the mask or have courage to face it as it is, a force that can both destroy and liberate us. Nietzsche didn't see desire as a smooth path, but as rough terrain, full of tensions. To desire is inevitably to suffer. Whoever desires is condemned to experience the absence of what they seek, the frustration of delay, the pain of never fully possessing. This is desire's cruel face. It doesn't promise rest, only movement. And yet, it's precisely from this suffering that something grand can be born: creation. When we think of suffering, we normally associate it with what should be avoided. We want comfort, stability, security. But Nietzsche believed suffering is an inseparable part of life, and that trying to eliminate it is the same as denying living itself. He said, only those who learn to endure pain are capable of creating something new. Desire, in this sense, functions like a wound that never heals, but that forces mind and body to move, to seek solutions, to invent new ways of dealing with emptiness. Think of the artist's example. Their desire to express a vision, emotion, or idea is never completely satisfied. There's always distance between what they imagine and what they manage to realize. This distance is painful, but it's what keeps them moving. If one day the artist could achieve the perfect work, they might never create again. What drives them isn't final possession, but constant lack. Thus, desire reveals itself as art's motor. Pain transformed into beauty. The same happens in other fields of life. A philosopher like Nietzsche himself never finds definitive answers. Their desire to understand existence leads them to write, reflect, deconstruct. But each answer found generates new questions, and the process never ends. It's this impossibility of total satisfaction that forces them to continue. The suffering of not knowing everything transforms into fuel for thought. Even in everyday experiences we can perceive this dynamic. Whoever intensely desires to conquer someone suffers with waiting, with doubts, with uncertainty about the future. But it's in this suffering that creative gestures arise, new words, bold attitudes, unexpected efforts. Desire, when it disturbs us, tears us from passivity and forces us to invent. And it's this invention, more than conquest itself, that transforms us. Nietzsche opposed the idea that we should deny desire to escape suffering. He saw in this a typical error of ascetic morality, wanting to silence impulses to seek peace. For him, true strength lay in bearing desire's weight, and, instead of fleeing from it, using it as flame for something greater. "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger," he said. The suffering caused by desire doesn't need to be prison. It can be gymnasium, a space where we train our capacity to create, resist, overcome. There's a profoundly human aspect in this. Much of historical achievement was born from unsatisfied desire. Hunger for knowledge led to science. Hunger for beauty generated works of art. Hunger for freedom drove revolutions. If desire were easily satisfied, perhaps humanity would have remained stagnant. It's precisely because we suffer with lack that we seek the new, that we dare to invent. Suffering, far from being an absolute enemy, is a severe but necessary teacher. Nietzsche then invites us to change our perspective. Instead of asking how to flee from the pain that desire brings, we should ask, what can I create from this pain? This inversion of view is what differentiates the resentful from the creator. The resentful curses their desires because they never manage to realize them. The creator transforms the same pain into energy to affirm life. Deep down, desire will never be fully satisfied, but it can be transfigured. Whoever loves without guarantees, creates without expecting perfection, lives without seeking rest, discovers a more elevated form of existing. They don't suffer less, but suffer more fertilely, transforming their lack into expression. Thus, the cruel truth Nietzsche reveals isn't that desire condemns us to suffering, but that this suffering can be the very condition of creation. The pain of desiring is the same flame that illuminates the path of overcoming. What matters isn't extinguishing this flame, but learning to bear it, shape it, transform it into power. Living, after all, isn't seeking relief from all lacks, but learning to dance with them. Desire is a burden, yes, but it's also the spark of everything that can be created. Whoever has courage to face this spark, even if it burns, discovers that suffering isn't just weight, it's also possibility. Until now, we've seen desire as vital force, as creative impulse, but also as illusion. However, there's an even darker aspect, when desire stops being motor and becomes prison. Nietzsche warned that if we're not capable of understanding and transforming our impulses, they transform us into slaves. At this point, desire is no longer creative force, but invisible chain that drags us. In daily life, this imprisonment appears clearly. Think of consumerism, the promise that the next purchased object will bring satisfaction. Advertising awakens in us artificial desires that never exhaust themselves. The new phone, fashionable clothes, the more powerful car, each acquisition brings brief relief, soon replaced by another invented necessity. In this cycle, desire doesn't move us toward creation, but chains us to eternal dissatisfaction. We're puppets of a game that always promises, but never delivers. Another example is toxic relationships. Often we believe we can't live without a certain person. Desire becomes dependence, and freedom disappears. Instead of loving, we begin to beg. Instead of sharing, we submit. The desire to possess the other transforms into obsession, and obsession weakens us. Nietzsche would see in this a clear symptom of decadence, when the will to power degrades into servile attachment, into inability to live by oneself. There's also the silent slavery of seeking approval. How many people shape their entire life to please others? The desire to be accepted, praised, recognized can become a prison as suffocating as iron chains. The individual distances themselves from themselves, renounces their authenticity just to adjust to external expectations. Nietzsche denounced this attitude as typical of herd spirit. Fear of affirming oneself leads the subject to live in the shadow of others' opinion, always desiring others' favorable gaze. The danger lies precisely in the fact that when we become slaves of desire, we believe we're exercising freedom. Whoever consumes endlessly believes they're choosing. Whoever clings to sick relationships believes they're loving. Whoever seeks recognition incessantly believes they're conquering respect. But actually, they're just repeating domination patterns. It's desire that commands, not the individual who uses it. Nietzsche provokes us to perceive this difference. He doesn't say we should eliminate desire that would be impossible and even contrary to life. What he defends is that we should learn to dominate it, or better, channel it. Desire should be at the service of our power, not the opposite. Whoever isn't capable of transforming their impulses into creation ends up being consumed by them. A symbolic example can be seen in the addict's figure. Whether drugs, gambling, social media, or status, the addict is one who lost the power to choose. They became dependent on the object of their desire, and life begins to revolve around this. Their existence reduces, their strength diminishes, their freedom disappears. For Nietzsche, this state is the opposite of affirmative life. It's decadence, surrender to nihilism. But we don't need to reach dependence's extreme to perceive this slavery. We just need to observe how we react to small privations. The discomfort of being without internet for some hours, anxiety when a message isn't answered, irritation at not being able to buy something desired. These signs reveal how much we're entangled in desires that dominate us. The central question is, who governs whom? Am I the one conducting my desire, or is it conducting me? For Nietzsche, this is the frontier between strength and weakness. The strong man is one who knows how to transform his impulses into creative expression. The weak man is one who lets himself be dragged, believing he's free when actually he's chained. This reflection shouldn't lead us to guilt, but to lucidity. For perceiving our slavery is the first step to breaking chains. Desire doesn't need to be denied, but needs to be reoriented. The question Nietzsche would ask us isn't how to end desire, but what do you do with it? If it only exhausts you, if it only imprisons you, then it's a force against you. But if you use it as fuel to create, overcome, affirm your own life, then it becomes an ally. The cruel truth is that desire can both liberate and enslave us. The challenge lies in taking responsibility for it, not blaming the world, not blaming others, but recognizing that we're the ones who give form to the flame that burns within us. And if we don't learn to shape it, it consumes us. Nietzsche never wanted us to destroy desire. He knew this would be the same as desiring life's end, because to desire is to be alive. What he proposes to us is something more radical, not to deny, but to transmute desire, transform what could imprison us into creative power, into affirmation. Transmutation is the movement of elevating desire's energy to a higher form, less naive, more conscious. But what does it mean in practice to transmute desire? It means removing illusions from it, abandoning the belief that an object, person, or conquest will bring definitive salvation. It means facing desire not as promise, but as flame. When we stop seeking rest in it and begin to see it as force of movement, we learn to live differently. Imagine someone who intensely desires social recognition. If they don't transform this desire, it becomes slavery. The person lives for others' applause, always anxious, always dependent. But if they transmute this desire, they can use it as impulse to create something truly worthwhile. The same impulse that before was prison becomes fuel for their work, their expression. Desire doesn't disappear, but changes form. Nietzsche saw in this process the possibility of living without resentment. The resentful is one who looks at desire with hatred because they never manage to satisfy it. They feel like life's victim, condemned to lack. The creator is one who accepts this lack as part of existence and transforms it into energy source. They don't delude themselves, but also don't lament. They know that desiring is always being in movement, and that it's in this movement that true life affirmation is found. This transmutation requires courage. Courage to abandon morality's ready-made discourses that promise us rest, but only give us guilt. Courage to live without guarantees, accepting there will never be final completeness. Courage to bear desire's suffering and, instead of fleeing, use it. It's an arduous path, but Nietzsche believed only those who walk it can reach higher life, the life of the overman, the being who creates their own values. In daily life, this courage can be seen in simple gestures. Whoever learns to desire without attachment transforms frustrations into learning. Whoever loves without illusion of possession transforms relationship into mutual growth. Whoever aspires without clinging to others' gaze transforms their search into creative realization. These are examples of transmutation in action. The same desire that could generate prison is converted into affirmation. Nietzsche used the flame metaphor. Desire is like fire. It can destroy or warm, burn or illuminate. What matters isn't extinguishing the fire, but learning to dance with it. Life isn't made to be controlled like an exact calculation, but to be experienced like a work of art. To transmute desire is to transform raw flame into conscious creation, without deceiving oneself with the promise that one day it will be extinguished. This vision may seem harsh because it takes away the comfort of hoping for final rest, but at the same time, it opens a possibility of unprecedented freedom. If desire will never disappear, then true freedom isn't not desiring, but choosing what to do with desire. We're free when we stop being its victims and begin being its creators. In the end, Nietzsche didn't want to rob us of passion, but return its true strength to us. Desire isn't an enemy to be fought, nor a god to be worshipped. It's raw material, and it's up to us to shape it. If we remain passive, it enslaves us. If we have courage to transmute it, it becomes fertile soil from which creation power, life affirmation is born. The cruel truth, then, isn't that desire condemns us to lack, but that it invites us to create endlessly. There will be no rest, no definitive salvation, but there will be intensity, there will be dance, there will be fire, and for Nietzsche, that's enough. For living fully isn't arriving at a destination, but being capable of transforming each flame of desire into a new form of life. Throughout this journey, we've seen that desire isn't just a passing impulse, but life's very mark in us. Nietzsche showed us its double face, force and illusion, creation and prison, suffering and power. Desiring is inevitable, but what we do with this desire is what determines our freedom. When we transform it into obsession, it enslaves us. When we repress it through morality or guilt, it weakens us. But when we have courage to transmute it, desire becomes creative flame, capable of illuminating previously invisible paths. The cruel truth is, there will never be completeness, never absolute rest. And yet it's precisely this absence that drives us to create, love, risk, live with intensity. Desire is lack, but also spark. It doesn't deliver peace to us, but invites us to dance with life in its rawest and truest form. And now, I ask you, what desire has most imprisoned you until today, and how could you transform it into power? What city are you watching from? Comment down below. If this reflection touched you in some way, like this video and subscribe to the channel.